So the brain is surrounded with fluid called the cerebrospinal fluid, and it goes all the way through the brain and all the way down to the spinal cord. And it's produced by it's called the choroid plexus, which is a whole bunch of blood vessels that are then filtering stuff out to make this fluid. And then that fluid just sort of naturally goes out through and then collects in the cisterns that we saw in that last video, and then reabsorbed into the blood system. And so you have these huge holes which are called ventricles, and the cerebrospinal fluid is going through. So here is a cross section of the brain. So this is a horizontal section, and then this would serve a 3D reconstruction where you can see the ventricles. They're really quite complex in structure. This is sort of the most interior layers of the brain sitting near the ventricles, and there's some interest in being able to actually feed electrodes up into the ventricles and put electrodes in on the inside of the ventricles as another place to record from as well. So here's a nice video of the ventricles.
We'll look at the main external features of the brain and also at the cavities within it, the ventricles. This model shows the shape of the ventricular system. It's formed by two small cavities in the midline, the third ventricle and the fourth ventricle, and two much larger cavities, the lateral ventricles, which connect to the third ventricle here. It's the third ventricle because the lateral ventricles are counted as the first two. The ventricles are filled with cerebrospinal fluid. We'll see more of them as we go along. To understand the external features of the brain, we'll start with the central stalk, which is known as the brainstem. To look at it, we'll take the rest of the brain out of the picture. Here's the brainstem. It consists of the medulla, the pons, and the midbrain. The brainstem contains tracts that connect the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the spinal cord. And it contains nuclei that serve basic autonomic functions. It's also the origin of nearly all the cranial nerves. The medulla is cone-shaped. It tapers down to become continuous with the spinal cord. The medulla becomes continuous with the spinal cord here at the foramen magnum. The medulla, the pons, and the midbrain are located just behind the basilar part of the occipital bone and the dorsum celli. The dorsal aspect of the medulla faces almost directly backwards. The back of the upper part of the medulla forms the floor of the fourth ventricle. On the model, this is the fourth ventricle, this is the floor. This arch of tissue is the superior medullary velum, which forms the roof of this part of the ventricle. This delicate tissue, the inferior medullary velum, forms this part of the roof. This cut surface is the attachment of the cerebellum. It's described as consisting of the superior, middle, and inferior cerebellar peduncles, which are somewhat fused together. The ventral aspect of the medulla is marked on each side by these bulges, the pyramid and the olive. Emerging from the ventral and lateral surfaces of the medulla are the filaments of the four lowest cranial nerves, the 12th, the hypoglossal, the cranial part of the 11th, the accessory, the 10th, the vagus, and the 9th, the glossopharyngeal.
The peduncle means foot, and so there was peduncles from the cerebellum. That was that cut surface you saw on the brainstem, and then there's also peduncle from the cerebrum, which is it's the huge pathway which is going from the motor cortex back down into the spinal cord. So that's one of the pathways we'll see is the peduncles.